I remember the exact second everything inside me went still. The front door clicked open like it always did, soft, familiar, almost comforting. It was 6:42 p.m. I know that because I had been staring at the clock on the oven for nearly 20 minutes, waiting for the sound that used to mean home and now felt like a countdown to something breaking. She stepped in, heels first. Then her voice, light and distracted, floated down the hallway. "Hey, you home already?" Already. That word hit me harder than anything else. I was sitting at the kitchen table, hands folded so tightly my knuckles had gone pale. The house smelled like garlic and butter, her favorite. I had cooked, set the table, even lit a candle like some version of the man I used to be before suspicion started eating me alive. Before him. She rounded the corner, still slipping her coat off, her hair slightly messy like she'd run her fingers through it a dozen times. Her lipstick was faded, but not gone, like it had been used. That's when I asked it. No hesitation, no build-up, no soft landing. "Do you love him?" The words landed between us, like a glass shattering on marble. She froze. Not dramatically, not like in movies where someone drops their bag or gasps. No, it was worse. Subtle, real. Her body paused mid-motion, coat halfway off her shoulders, eyes locking onto mine with something I couldn't immediately name. Guilt. Fear. Or just calculation. "What?" she said too quickly. I didn't blink, I didn't move. I had rehearsed this moment 100 times in my head, but now that it was here, everything felt terrifyingly simple. I asked, I repeated, my voice quieter now steadier, "Do you love him?" Her coat slipped off completely, falling onto the floor behind her forgotten. She didn't pick it up. Instead, she laughed. A small, disbelieving laugh. The kind you give when you're trying to turn something serious into something ridiculous. "Are you serious right now?" she said, shaking her head. "What are you even talking about?" I leaned back slowly in my chair, studying her like I didn't know her anymore. And maybe I didn't. "You know exactly what I'm talking about," I said. "So I'll ask one more time, and this time I want the truth." My chest tightened, but I pushed through it. "Do you love him?" Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. She looked away first. That's when I knew. Not because she said it. Not because I had proof laid out on the table, though I did. But because the woman who used to meet my eyes through anything suddenly couldn't hold my gaze for more than 2 seconds. "I don't know what you think you've seen," she started, her tone shifting now, defensive, cautious. "But you're blowing this way out of proportion." A slow, hollow laugh escaped me. "Out of proportion," I repeated. "So the late nights, the locked phone, the work dinners that somehow always end after midnight, that's all in my head." She crossed her arms, putting distance between us without taking a step back. "You're being paranoid," she said flatly. Paranoid? That word again. Funny how people use it when the truth gets too close. I stood up then, slowly, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on my chest. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears, but my voice stayed calm. Too calm. His name, S. Daniel Wright. That got her. I saw it instantly, the flicker, the crack. It was small, barely there, but I'd spent 10 years loving this woman. I knew every expression, every microreaction, and that one. That was panic. What? She stammered, but it came out weaker this time. I walked toward the counter, reached for my phone, and tapped the screen. For a second, I just stared at it, at the evidence that had been burning a hole in my pocket for days. Then I turned it toward her. A message thread. Her name at the top. His name underneath. Daniel. Her face drained of color as she took a step closer, eyes scanning the screen. "You went through my phone," she whispered, like that was the real betrayal here. I almost smiled. "No," I said quietly, "you left it unlocked, again." Her lips parted, but no words came out. The messages were right there, clear, undeniable. Inside jokes that weren't mine anymore. Plans that didn't include me. And one line I couldn't unread no matter how hard I tried. "I wish I was falling asleep next to you tonight." I watched her read it. I watched the exact moment she realized I had seen everything. The room felt smaller somehow. like the walls were closing in, forcing us to finally face what we'd been dancing around for weeks. "Say something," I said. My voice cracked this time. Just slightly, but enough. She set her jaw, trying to rebuild whatever composure she had left. "It's not what you think," she said. There it was. The oldest line in the book. I shook my head slowly. "Then tell me what it is," I said, "because from where I'm standing, it looks like my wife is in love with another man." Her eyes snapped back to mine, sharper now. "I didn't say that." I took a step closer. "But you didn't deny it either." That hit. I could see it in the way her shoulders dropped, just a fraction. Like the fight was draining out of her, leaving something heavier behind. Something real. For a moment, just a moment, I thought she might actually tell me the truth. The whole truth. Instead, she looked down at the floor, her voice barely above a whisper. "It just happened." 4 words. That's all it took to unravel 10 years. "It just happened," I repeated, disbelief flooding every inch of me. "That's what you're going with." Tears welled up in her eyes, but they didn't fall. Not yet. "I didn't plan this," she said. "I didn't wake up one day and decide to hurt you." "But you did anyway," I shot back. Silence again. Only this time, it felt final. Like something had officially broken, beyond repair. I ran a hand through my hair, turning away from her for a second because if I kept looking at her, I wasn't sure what I'd do. Yell, break something, or worse, forgive her. And I couldn't afford that. Not now. Not after this. "When?" I asked, still facing away. She didn't answer. I closed my eyes, inhaled slowly. "When did it start?" I pressed, my voice firmer this time. "A few months ago," she admitted quietly. "A few months." I nodded slowly, doing the math in my head. "That trip to Chicago?" I asked. She hesitated. That was answer enough. I let out a bitter laugh. "Of course it was. That was the trip she called me every night, telling me she missed me. The trip where she brought me back a watch I'd been wanting for years. The trip where, apparently, she met him." I turned back to her, something colder settling into my chest now. Not anger. "Clarity. Do you love him?" I asked again. 3rd time. This time, it mattered more than anything. She looked at me, really looked at me, and for the first time since she walked in, she didn't look away. And that scared me more than anything else. For a second, I almost told myself she was going to say no. That she'd shake her head, walk over, grab my hands, and tell me I was losing it, that none of this was real, that I was still the man she chose every day. But she didn't move. She didn't come closer. She just stood there, staring at me like she was standing on the edge of something she couldn't come back from. And then she said it. "I don't know." 3 words. Somehow worse than yes. Worse than a clean, brutal truth. "I don't know," she repeated, her voice cracking this time, like she needed me to understand that this confusion meant something, that it softened the blow. It didn't. I let out a slow breath, nodding like I'd just heard the final verdict in a trial I already knew I'd lost. "Right," I murmured, "of course you don't." She took a step toward me then, finally closing the space between us, but it didn't feel like comfort. It felt like damage control. "Listen to me," she said quickly. "It's complicated." I laughed. Actually laughed. A hollow, sharp sound that didn't even feel like it came from me. "No," I said, shaking my head. "It's really not." Her expression tightened. "You don't get it," she insisted. "You haven't been." "Don't," I cut her off, my voice suddenly hard. "Don't you dare turn this into something I did." That stopped her cold. Because she had been about to. I could see it all over her face. The shift, the angle, the story forming in her head where this somehow became my fault. Where my long hours, or my exhaustion, or the way I stopped planning date nights like I used to became the justification. "I wasn't going to blame you," she said, but it sounded weak. Even she didn't believe it. I stepped closer now, lowering my voice. "Then what were you going to say?" I asked. "That you felt lonely, that I changed, that I wasn't enough anymore." Her silence answered for her. "God." There it was. I nodded slowly, absorbing it piece by piece like shards of glass. "Say it," I whispered, Go ahead, finish it. She swallowed hard, tears finally spilling over. You were there, she said. And just like that, 10 years of memories started rearranging themselves in my head. Late nights at the office. Missed calls. Canceled dinners. All the little moments I thought were sacrifices for us, suddenly being rewritten as reasons she needed someone else. I let that sit for a second. Then I nodded again, slower this time. You're right, I said quietly. She blinked, surprised. I wasn't there sometimes, I admitted. I got busy, I got tired, I stopped being perfect. I stepped even closer, close enough to see the mascara starting to run under her eyes. But you know what I didn't do, I added. She didn't respond. I didn't go looking for someone else. That landed. Hard. Her face crumpled, and for a second I saw the woman I used to know, the one who hated disappointing me, the one who would have done anything to fix things before they broke. But that woman, she felt far away now. Buried under choices she couldn't undo. I never meant for this to happen, she whispered again, like repeating it might somehow make it true in a way that mattered. I shook my head. No one ever does, I said, but it still happens, and now we're here. The room went quiet again, but this silence was different. It wasn't tense. It was empty. Like all the important things had already been said, and what was left were just echoes. I walked past her, grabbing my jacket from the back of the chair. Where are you going? She asked quickly, panic creeping into her voice. I paused for a second, my hand tightening around the fabric. I don't know, I said honestly. Somewhere I don't have to stand here and picture you with him. That hit harder than anything else I'd said. She flinched like I'd slapped her. Don't say that, she whispered. Why not? I turned back, frustration finally breaking through the calm. It's real, isn't it? That's what you want, right? Honesty. Her lips trembled. I made a mistake, she said. I stared at her. A mistake, I repeated. Forgetting to pick up milk is a mistake. This, I gestured between us, this is a series of decisions, hundreds of them. She didn't argue. Because she couldn't. And the worst part? I continued, my voice quieter now, more controlled. You didn't even stop. Not once. Not when it started. Not when it got serious. Not even when you came home to me every night and pretended everything was fine. I was trying to figure it out, she said, desperation creeping in. I didn't want to lose you. I stared at her for a long moment. You should have thought about that before you risked me, I said. That line, that one broke something. She covered her mouth, a sob escaping before she could stop it. And for a split second, just one, I felt it. The urge to walk over, pull her into my arms, tell her we'd fix it like we always did. But then I remembered the message. I wish I was falling asleep next to you tonight. And that feeling disappeared just as fast as it came. You said you didn't know if you loved him, I said, circling back, needing clarity like oxygen. So what is it then? She wiped at her tears, struggling to get the words out. He makes me feel seen, she admitted. I closed my eyes briefly. Of course he did. He listens, she added. He notices things, little things. Every word was a knife, but I forced myself to stand there and take it. And I did, I asked quietly. She hesitated. You used to, she said. Used to. Past tense. I nodded slowly, letting that sink in. So that's it, I asked. That's all it takes. Someone new paying attention, and suddenly everything we built doesn't matter. It's not like that, she said quickly. You're twisting it. No, I said, my voice steady again. I'm simplifying it because honestly, it's not that complicated. She looked at me like she wanted to argue, but the words just weren't there anymore. Because deep down she knew. I need you to answer one thing, I said after a moment. She nodded faintly. If I hadn't found out, I continued, holding her gaze, would you have stopped? That question hung in the air longer than anything else. Longer than the accusations. Longer than the confessions. Because this one cut straight to the truth. Her eyes filled again, but she didn't speak. Didn't even try. And that silence, that was the loudest answer of all. I exhaled slowly, something inside me settling into place. Not peace. Not yet. but something close to acceptance. Yeah, I said under my breath, that's what I thought. I slipped my jacket on, heading toward the door. Wait, she called out, her voice breaking. Please don't walk out like this. I stopped with my hand on the doorknob. Didn't turn around. Then tell me something worth staying for, I said quietly. Silence. Again. Always silence when it mattered most. I closed my eyes, nodding to myself. Yeah, I whispered, that's what I thought. And this time, I opened the door. The cold hit me first. Not just the air outside, but the kind that settles in your chest when something ends and your body hasn't caught up yet. I stood on the porch longer than I needed to, staring out at nothing in particular, like the world had suddenly lost focus. Behind me, the door was still open. She hadn't closed it. I could hear her breathing, uneven, shaky, like she was waiting for me to turn around. Waiting for me to come back inside, to say something that would magically undo everything we just said. I didn't. Instead, I stepped forward. One step, then another, each one heavier than the last. Please, she said from behind me, her voice breaking completely now. Don't go like this. I stopped at the edge of the driveway. Closed my eyes. For a moment, I let the memories hit me, hard and fast, like they were trying to drag me back. The first apartment we ever shared. The night we stayed up until 3 a.m. assembling furniture and ended up laughing on the floor because we put the bookshelf together backwards. The way she used to reach for my hand in public without even thinking about it. 10 years. 10 years don't just disappear. They echo. They linger. They fight to survive, even when everything else is falling apart. I exhaled slowly and kept walking. Because memories don't erase betrayal. I got in the car and just sat there for a second, hands gripping the steering wheel. My reflection stared back at me from the windshield, tired, hollow, older than I remembered. Get it together, I muttered to myself. But I didn't start the engine right away. Instead, I pulled out my phone. Opened the messages again. I don't know why I did that. Maybe I needed to hurt a little more. Maybe I needed to make sure this was real. Her name. His name. Daniel. I scrolled. Laughing emojis. Late-night conversations. Pictures she never sent me. And then I saw something I hadn't noticed before. A message from him. When are you going to tell him? My chest tightened. Her reply came a minute later. I don't know yet, soon, I just need time. Time. I let out a bitter breath, shaking my head. So that was the plan, I whispered. She wasn't confused. She wasn't lost. She was waiting. Waiting for the right moment to destroy me in a way that felt convenient. Clean. Controlled. My grip on the phone tightened. And that's when something shifted. Not heartbreak. Not grief. Something colder. Something sharper. Clarity. I leaned back in the seat, staring up at the darkening sky. You don't get to do this to me, I said quietly. The words felt different this time. Not desperate. Not broken. Certain. Because suddenly, I wasn't the one losing control anymore. I started the car. The engine roared to life, grounding me back in reality. For the first time since she walked through that door, my thoughts felt organized. Focused. And one question kept repeating in my mind. Who the hell is Daniel? Not just the name. The man. What does he do? Where did they meet? How far has this gone? Because if there was one thing I knew now, it wasn't just emotional. No. This was deeper than that. And I needed to see it for myself. I pulled out of the driveway, not looking back. Not this time. I didn't go far. Just a few blocks down, I parked near a quiet street where the streetlights flickered on one by one. My phone was still in my hand, screen glowing against the darkness. I opened her contact, stared at it. My thumb hovered over the call button. Then I locked the phone and tossed it onto the passenger seat. No, I said under my breath, not like this. If she wanted control, she'd lost it. I lean my head back thinking, replaying everything. The late nights, the sudden gym routine she never invited me to, the way she smiled at her phone, not at me. And then it hit me. Chicago. She said it started a few months ago. That trip. I remembered something now, something I didn't think twice about back then. A name she mentioned casually on the phone. Daniel from marketing. At the time, it meant nothing. Now, it meant everything. I grabbed my phone again and opened LinkedIn. Typed it in. Daniel. Marketing. Company name. A few profiles popped up. I scrolled. And then I found him. Daniel Reeves. Late 30s. Clean-cut, confident smile. The kind of guy who knew exactly how to walk into a room and make people notice. Of course it was someone like him. I stared at his profile picture longer than I should have. Comparing. Me versus him. Noticing things I hadn't noticed about myself in years. And I hated that. I hated that he even got space in my head. But I couldn't ignore it. Because this man, this stranger, had somehow inserted himself into my life without ever meeting me. I clicked on his profile. Scrolled. Posts about leadership. Photos from corporate events. And then, there it was. A picture from Chicago. A group shot. Employees smiling, drinks in hand. And there she was. Standing next to him. Closer than she should have been. Her hand lightly touching his arm. Both of them smiling like they shared something no one else in that photo knew about. My jaw tightened. Yeah, I whispered, that's where it started. I zoomed in. Studied every detail like it was evidence in a case I was building. Because now this wasn't just pain. This was something else. Something that needed answers. Something that needed balance. I locked the phone and sat there in silence. The night had fully settled now, wrapping everything in a quiet darkness that matched exactly how I felt. I wasn't shaking anymore. Wasn't pacing. Wasn't trying to fix anything. That version of me, the one who would have begged, negotiated, tried to save what was left. He was gone. In his place was someone else. Someone who understood something very clearly now. She didn't just break my trust. She underestimated me. And that was a mistake. I started the car again, pulling back onto the road. Not heading home. Not yet. Because I needed one thing first. The truth. The full, unfiltered truth. And if she wasn't going to give it to me, I'd find it myself. No matter what it took, I didn't go back home that night. Not because I couldn't. Because I wouldn't. There's a difference. Home wasn't a place anymore. It was a question, a doubt, a space filled with things that suddenly felt staged, like every memory in those walls had been quietly rewritten behind my back. So instead, I drove. No destination, no plan, just empty roads and a head full of thoughts that refused to slow down. At some point, I pulled into a 24-hour diner off the highway. The kind of place with flickering neon lights and booths that had seen better days. It smelled like burnt coffee and late-night regrets. Perfect. I slid into a corner booth, my jacket still on, my phone still in my hand. The waitress came by, asked if I wanted anything. Black coffee, I said. She nodded and walked away without a word. I stared at the table, tracing the edge of a crack in the wood like it meant something. Then I picked up my phone again. Daniel Reeves. I opened his profile one more time. This time, I didn't just look. I studied. Every post, every comment, every interaction. Patterns. Because people always leave patterns. And he wasn't careful. There were likes on her posts. Comments that seemed harmless at first glance, but now I could see the tone beneath them. Inside jokes disguised as professionalism. Familiarity wrapped in corporate language. It was almost impressive. Almost. Then I noticed something else. A tagged location. A bar in Chicago. Same week as the trip. Same night she told me she was too tired to talk and went to bed early. My jaw clenched. I tapped through the photos. Dim lighting, music, smiling faces. And there he was again. Different angle this time. Different moment. But the same look. The kind of look a man gives when he knows he's already won. I leaned back in the booth, just as the waitress dropped off my coffee. "Long night?" she asked casually. I gave a small nod. "You could say that." She glanced at my phone, then back at me. "Don't go looking for things you're not ready to find," she said, almost like advice, not judgment. I gave a dry smile. "Too late." She didn't argue, just nodded and walked off. I stared at the coffee for a second before taking a sip. Bitter. Fitting. I set the cup down and made a decision. If I wanted the truth, I wasn't going to get it from filtered profiles and curated posts. No. I needed to hear it from the source. I scrolled back to her contact. This time, I pressed call. It rang once. Twice. 3 times. Then, "Hello." Her voice was soft, fragile, like she'd been crying for hours. For a split second, it pulled at something in me. Old instincts. Old habits. But I pushed it down. "Where is he?" I asked. No greeting, no hesitation. Silence. "Then what?" "Daniel," I said flatly, "where is he right now?" She exhaled shakily. "I don't know," she said. "Why are you?" "Stop," I cut her off. "Just stop lying." "I'm not lying," she insisted, but there was no strength behind it. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "You were going to tell him," I said. "I saw the message." Silence again. Thicker this time. "He knows about me," I continued. "He knows I exist, so let me ask you something. What exactly did you tell him?" Her breathing hitched. "I didn't." "What did you tell him?" I repeated louder now. "That we were having problems," she snapped suddenly, like the truth had finally been forced out. "That things weren't good between us." I froze. "Problems," I echoed. "Yeah," she said, her voice breaking. "Because you were distant, you were always working, you stopped. Being perfect," I finished for her. She didn't respond. Because she didn't need to. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "So in his version," I said slowly, "I'm the guy who checked out, and you're the one who got hurt." "That's not what I said," she whispered. "But it's what he believes," I shot back, "isn't it?" Another silence. Another answer. I rubbed my face, exhaustion creeping in. "You didn't just cheat," I said quietly. "You rewrote our story to justify it." "I didn't mean to." "Yeah," I cut in, tired of hearing that phrase. "You never mean to, that's the theme here." She started crying again. Louder this time. Uncontrolled. "I don't want to lose you," she said through sobs. I closed my eyes. There it was again. That line. Like it still meant something. "You already did," I said. The words came out colder than I expected. But they were true. And she felt it. I could hear it in the way her crying suddenly went quiet, like something inside her had finally accepted what her mind had been avoiding. "Is there anything I can do?" she asked softly. I didn't answer right away. Because the truth. There probably was. There's always something. Apologies, therapy, time. But none of that mattered if the foundation was gone. And ours. It wasn't cracked. It was gone. "I want to meet him," I said finally. That got her attention. "What?" she said, shocked. "You heard me," I replied. "I want to look him in the eye." "No," she said immediately. "That's a bad idea." "I'm not asking for your opinion." "You're angry," she insisted. "This won't fix anything." I let out a slow breath. "I'm not trying to fix anything," I said. "I'm trying to understand something." "What?" she asked. I stared down at my reflection in the dark coffee. "What he has," I said, "that made you risk everything." Silence. Then, "He didn't make me do anything," she said quietly. I gave a faint, humorless smile. "Interesting," I murmured, "because from where I'm sitting, he didn't stop you either." She didn't respond. Couldn't. Set it up, I said. Tomorrow, somewhere public. No, she said again, more firmly this time. I won't be part of that. I leaned forward, my voice dropping. You already are, I said, whether you like it or not. She went quiet. And I knew that silence. It wasn't resistance. It was fear. Because she could feel it now. This wasn't spiraling. This was shifting. Control had changed hands. I'll text you the details, I said. And before she could respond, I hung up. I stared at the phone for a long moment, the weight of what I'd just set in motion settling in. This wasn't about confrontation. Not really. It was about closure. Clarity. And maybe something else. Something I hadn't fully named yet. I took another sip of the coffee, wincing slightly at how cold it had gotten. Then I stood up, dropped cash on the table, and walked out into the night. The air felt different now. Sharper. Cleaner. Like a storm had passed, but something bigger was still on the horizon. Tomorrow, I'd meet the man who thought he knew my life. The man who thought he knew my wife. The man who thought he had already won. I slipped my hands into my pockets, a quiet resolve settling deep in my chest. He had no idea who he was about to sit across from. The next morning felt unreal. Like I was stepping into someone else's life, watching it unfold from a distance, detached from the weight it should have carried. I woke up in a cheap motel off the highway, sunlight cutting through the thin curtains like it didn't care what kind of night I'd had. For a moment, I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to remember what normal used to feel like. Then it hit me again. Her. Him. Everything. I sat up slowly, ran a hand over my face, and reached for my phone. One new message. From her. 2 p.m., cafe on 5th, please don't make this worse. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I typed back. Too late. I didn't wait for a reply. The cafe was exactly what you'd expect. Minimalist, quiet, the kind of place where people pretend their lives are together while sipping overpriced coffee and typing on laptops. Perfect setting for a confrontation. I got there early. Of course I did. I chose a table near the back where I could see the entrance clearly, sat down, ordered nothing, just waited. And then at exactly 2:03 p.m. he walked in. Daniel. Same as the photos. Maybe a little taller than I expected, confident posture, clean shirt, the kind of guy who looked like he belonged anywhere he stepped into. He scanned the room once, and then his eyes landed on me. He knew. Of course he did. There was no hesitation as he walked over, no confusion, just a quiet understanding that this moment had been coming. Hey, he said, stopping at the table. Hey. I almost laughed at how casual that sounded. That's what you're going with, I replied, leaning back slightly. He didn't react, just pulled out the chair across from me and sat down. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Just two men, sitting across from each other, connected by one person who had managed to break them both in completely different ways. You wanted to meet, he said finally. I did. Another pause. Then I leaned forward, resting my arms on the table. I'm going to keep this simple, I said. Do you love her? His expression didn't change much. But I saw it. That flicker. That same one she had. Yes, he said. No hesitation. No confusion. Just yes. I nodded slowly. Good, I said. At least one of you knows. That hit. He shifted slightly in his seat, but didn't look away. She told me things weren't working between you, he said carefully, that you were distant. I smiled. There it was again. The version of me I never agreed to. I figured, I said, that makes it easier, right? It wasn't like that, he replied. I didn't plan. Yeah, I cut him off. You didn't mean for it to happen. I've heard that one already. Silence. I studied him for a second, trying to understand something that had been eating at me since last night. What is it? I asked. He frowned slightly. What? What do you have? I clarified. That made her risk 10 years. That one landed differently. He didn't answer right away. Because there was no clean answer. No one makes someone cheat, he said eventually. I let out a quiet breath. That's not what I asked. He leaned back slightly, exhaling. I listened, he said. I showed up. Simple. Clean. Infuriating. I nodded. Yeah, I murmured. That seems to be the theme. Another pause. Then he looked at me, more directly now. For what it's worth, he added, I didn't know how serious things were between you at first. I raised an eyebrow. You mean the marriage part? I asked. He winced slightly. Yeah, he admitted. I let out a short laugh. Convenient. I'm not proud of it, he said. No, I agreed. You're just participating in it. That shut him up. For a second, I thought about what I expected from this. Anger. Shouting. Some kind of explosion. But sitting there, face to face. It didn't feel like that. It felt clear. Painfully clear. Because the truth was, he wasn't the villain. Not really. He was just the opportunity. The door. The thing she walked through when she decided what we had wasn't enough. And that realization. It shifted everything. I leaned back in my chair, studying him one last time. Then I asked the only question left that mattered. Are you going to stay? I said. He didn't pretend to misunderstand. With her, he asked. I nodded. He hesitated this time. For the first time since he sat down, he wasn't certain. I don't know, he admitted. That surprised me. You love her, I said. I do, he replied. Then why don't you know? He looked down at the table for a second before answering. Because I've seen how this started, he said quietly, and I'd be lying if I said that doesn't matter. There it was. The crack. The doubt. I nodded slowly. Yeah, I said, it should. We sat in silence after that. No more questions. No more accusations. Just the weight of everything, settling where it belonged. Finally, I stood up. He looked up at me. That's it, he asked. I thought about it for a second. Then I gave a small nod. That's it. No fight. No scene. No drama. Because I got what I came for. The truth. And the truth was simple. She didn't fall. She chose. And now so would I. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and placed it on the table in front of him. He frowned. What's this? Her contact, I said. You'll probably need it more than I will. He looked at me, confused. I met his gaze one last time. Take care of her, I added. Or don't, that part's not my problem anymore. And just like that, I walked away. I didn't go back to the house. Not that day. Not the next. Instead, I filed the papers. Quietly. Cleanly. No revenge, no chaos. Just distance. She tried to call. Text. Explain. But some things don't need more words. They need endings. A week later, I went back one last time. The house felt different. Empty. Like it already knew, I didn't belong there anymore. She was sitting on the couch when I walked in. Eyes red, hands shaking. Is it really over? She asked. I looked at her. Really looked at her. And for the first time since all of this started, I didn't see my future. I saw my past. Yes, I said. Her lip trembled. But I love you, she whispered. I nodded. I believe you, I said. And I did. That was the complicated part. Love was there. But it wasn't enough. It hadn't been enough when it mattered. You just didn't choose me, I added quietly. That broke her. Completely. She started crying again, but this time, I didn't feel the urge to fix it. Because it wasn't mine to fix anymore. I turned, heading toward the door. Wait, she said through tears. Will you ever forgive me? I paused. Hand on the knob. Thought about it. And then, maybe, I said honestly, but not in a way that brings me back. Silence. Then I opened the door, stepped outside, and this time, I didn't hesitate. I didn't look back. Because some endings aren't loud. They don't come with shouting or slammed doors. Some endings are quiet, final, and necessary. I walked down the steps, into the open air, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not happiness. Not yet. But something close. Freedom. Because in the end, she didn't just lose me. She taught me something I'll never forget. Never stay where you have to ask if you're still chosen.